$350,000. By the time I graduate, I expect it to probably hit $400,000, maybe a little more.
God! What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jake and this is Sensible Capital, and today I'm reacting to Millennial Money, living on a $28,000 annual stipend in
New York City.
For those of you who don't already know, I've worked in finance my entire professional career and as a licensed financial advisor for the vast majority of that. So let's get into it.
The first 3 years of medical school, I was living almost entirely off of loans.
Student.
My student loan balance as of now is around $350,000. By the time I graduate, I expect it to probably hit $400,000, maybe a little more.
God! That's a lot of money. Not unexpected for a med student, though. Sadly.
My name is Alexandra Capolini, and I'm a 26-year-old medical student living in New York City on a $28,000 stipend.
That's tough to do.
Right now, I'm on a research year in between my third and fourth years of school. The average week for me is pretty busy because I'm taking master's classes mostly at night and then working full-time with the research team during the day.
Okay, that makes sense.
I live in med student housing on the Upper East Side, which is extremely subsidized to be about $650 each month. And for this neighborhood, that is almost unheard of. With
that salary in New York City, your money's not going to go very far. I mean, you are going to be pinching pennies every step of the way. So it's definitely a good thing that her parents are helping her. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have any discretionary income off of that.
Almost all of my friends in medical school rely on some form of family support in order to make ends meet here, because we're 26, 27 years old and none of us have, the $80,000 that you need a year for tuition and living expenses.
It's true. Oh, okay, we got the
There are
budget.
definitely challenges that come with living in such an expensive city like New York on this research stipend, and even then,
The first thing that stands out to me, of course, is her largest expense is eating out. Now, of course, if it weren't for her parents helping her out with the rent and her medical expenses, those would be above that, but that's quite a bit. Let's look at just her discretionary, really. $400 for eating out, $250 for discretionary, laundry, shopping, and trips. Now, I can't imagine she's spending anywhere close to that on laundry, so most of that's probably coming from shopping and trips. We've got $150 on entertainment. That's Broadway shows, comedy, and concerts. $107 on subscriptions, gym, Spotify, and Hulu. Most of that, I imagine, is coming from the gym. $907 on discretionary expenses. Discretionary meaning, of course, she doesn't have to spend on these things to be able to get by. She could, in theory, just not spend any of that money and still survive. If we're following like a sort of standard budgeting method, like the 50-30-20 method, 50% going towards your needs, 30% towards your wants, 20% towards savings, we're looking at kind of the opposite of that. I mean, she's spending around 50% on the wants, 30% on the needs. If we're looking at groceries, transportation, and utilities, I mean, that's like $550. And then the remaining on savings, that's a little less than 20% or so for $300. Granted, things are a little bit skewed because her parents are helping her out with the other expenses. She is spending a pretty substantial amount on the wants. It's not uncommon for someone in this position to do that, especially if you're in med school. You're in a position where you recognize, hey, I'm having to live pretty lean right now, but I know that in the future I'm going to be making a more substantial amount, be able to pay down this debt, hopefully, and then set aside more money in the future. But that still doesn't change the fact that we could probably do a little bit better in the meantime. If you want to see just how rough this would be if her parents weren't helping her, just between her rent and health insurance, which the health insurance is quite expensive, $450 a month. I mean, that's over $1,100. I mean, between that groceries, transportation, and utilities, she's got $100 left for everything else each month. She would barely be able to get by if she didn't have the help of her parents. Now, she'd be able to make it work, and there are plenty of people who do, but that just goes to show you how crazy this can be when you're living on a low salary in a high cost of living area like New York City. Yeah, she spends
this is a
pretty
pricey
decent amount
city,
eating out.
and I try not to go overboard.
Could definitely be
I
worse,
also want
but
to enjoy the
could be
weekend
better
with
as well.
friends.
It is good that she saves
It's
money.
refreshing knowing that I can do that, but I also know that at the end of this year, when I go into 4th year, I'll go back to, letting that savings account sit pretty quiet.
Okay, no credit cards.
I'm very much relying on the debit card. My parents were pretty strict with me, wanting to be financially independent, and had basically told me, you can open up a credit card when you have a stable, consistent income, and you can pay it off in full at your own pace every single month without needing to lean on us. And I think that's one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to when I actually start making a salary in residency.
Absolutely nothing wrong with what her parents said there. They want her to wait until she has a strong, consistent income to be able to pay off the credit card. At the same time, there are ways that you could approach that where you can be establishing credit, and you probably should be trying to establish credit this whole time, because by the time she's earning that amount, we're talking years from now, she's going to be approaching 30 years old. And to just start building your credit at that age, it's absolutely possible, but you're going to be a little bit behind the curve when it comes to it. So you can do things in that situation like open a secured credit card. It's going to have a smaller limit. It's going to be secured by a deposit that you're going to give that lender, and something like that can allow you to at least kind of establish credit, get that credit history started, because that's going to be one of the components that makes up your score. And the sooner that you can do that, the better that's going to look and reflect on your score, and put yourself in a position where you're not necessarily enabled to spend a massive amount of money and go crazy, but you're still able to contribute and kind of lay that foundation. The main thing is, when it comes to being in a situation like hers and opening credit cards, is that you have to understand yourself and your habits. If you're someone who is going to be enabled by having a credit card, even with a smaller limit, and you're just going to spend more money because you have that, you're going to stray from a budget, you need to recognize that that's going to be the case, and you don't want to put yourself in that position. She's already going to be starting off day one with a massive amount of debt from the student loans. The last thing she needs is even worse debt in the form of credit card debt. So if you can be responsible, if you're someone like me, for instance, who isn't going to be tempted to spend more money because they have the credit card in their pocket, then yes, absolutely get started as soon as possible. It's only going to help you out. If you're someone who is going to be enabled by that and doesn't have the sort of self-control that you need to still rein in your spending and stick to a budget, probably better off waiting and at least getting the budget in order first before you do so. Wow, that is a substantial amount for undergrad. Whew. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for undergrad. I'm wondering what the situation was there, her going to an out-of-state school, a private school. School is not cheap by any means, but I'm assuming she was a bio major or something of that sort. It's definitely possible to get a degree in that area for less than $130K before getting into med school. That's a deep hole that you're gonna have to dig yourself out of. And it's very possible on a doctor's salary, but it's gonna take time.
So my salary as a resident, which is the next step of training after you graduate from medical school, would probably be something in the range of maybe $55,000 to $65,000. And that would be my salary for, the next 4 or 5 years. And so I could start paying back some of my loans during that time. When I think about future salary, I think I can expect to earn the range of the mid 200,000s.
Right.
And I think that would leave me in a good place to at least make a dent with these loans, but it's still going to take decades.
You have to understand, when you're going into a program like that, whether it be medicine, law, any of these ones that are going to require a lot of money and a lot of time, where you're not going to be earning as much or really anything, but you've got that faint light in the distance that is that 200, 300K plus salary that you're going to be earning. You got to understand you're going to be living lean for a little while to get to that point. And then when you do, it's important that you still try to live below your means so that you can pay back that debt and you can start to build and amass wealth at that point. Otherwise, again, nothing's going to happen. If anything, that debt would just continue to grow and snowball in a negative way if you're spending the same exact way. So the budget's still got to be on point when you're earning that much money.
I walk on an above knee prosthesis with a computerized knee for about 16 to 18 hours a day. The computer in the knee is what controls the change in the speed that the knee's bending.
That's cool.
And a little bit of the bounce in my step.
Wow, $130K for that.
My health insurance
New prosthetics
cover
were
the cost
expensive,
of,
but
the full leg, including the knee, and that will last
explains the health
maybe
insurance
about
costs.
4 or 5 years before I'll be due for something new. But I go in for a lot of maintenance checks just to make sure that the computer in the knee is working properly, that everything's charging correctly, that there are no kinks to work out, and a lot of the mechanics of how the leg's working.
That's a pretty decent amount that she's spending. If you've been rock climbing before, you know those gyms are not cheap.
I definitely consider myself a product of so many people within medicine and the healthcare system who have spent a lot of time and energy and put a lot of thought and care into really guiding me through cancer survivorship and life as an amputee. And I carry that with me in everything that I do every day. So when I think about having an opportunity to someday be in a care team that's taking care of a child who's facing a cancer diagnosis or limb loss and what that whole family's going through, that is so meaningful and rewarding that I don't think too hard about the costs of getting there, because that's still my guiding force. That's still what gets me up in the morning, and I'm just trying to find a way there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for her. I hope that she, does really well in the future. She seems like she's, got her stuff together. The budget's a little off, but honestly, when it comes to people in those situations, that's not unexpected. The mindset a lot of times is when you've already got this massive amount of debt and you know that you're going to be earning a respectable amount in the future is, hey, what's a little bit extra? I've still got to enjoy my life now. And of course, I understand where that's coming from. She's going to be successful. I'm sure she's going to have everything in order when she graduates and is making her real salary. One of the things to think about, if you are going into a position like that where you're going to be graduating with a lot of debt, you could potentially work in the public sector as opposed to the private sector. There are programs where you can potentially be put on a payment plan if you're working in the public sector. I believe it's for 10 years. And then at the end of that period of making consistent payments, the remainder of your debt can potentially be waived. If you're going to do something like that, it is absolutely imperative that you do your research, understand exactly what you're getting into so that you don't make any mistakes and, go accept a job that's probably going to pay you less if we're talking public versus private sector, only to find out that, hey, you made a mistake along the way and your debt is not actually going to be waived when it's all said and done. Thanks again for joining me, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks again for watching, and always remember to be sensible.